Riders are furious, and they should be. Harley built its reputation on loyalty, heritage, and pride, but now the very symbols of that legacy are being erased overnight. No warning, no respect, no chance for riders to say goodbye. For those who sacrificed, saved, and rode with honor, it feels like betrayal carved in chrome. And that fury isn't fading, it's growing. Stay with me because what Harley just did may mark the beginning of its downfall. The bikes they stole from us. One morning, the Iron and the 48 were just gone. No warning, no farewell tour, no chance for riders to say goodbye to machines that carried decades of meaning. They were ripped from the lineup like they never existed. That silence hit harder than any recall or redesign, because it felt like history being erased overnight. If you grew up staring at those models in magazines, or saving every dollar for the day you could finally ride one home, Harley erased a piece of your story. It was not just about a motorcycle, it was about the rite of passage, the badge of pride, the dream that made you fall in love with two wheels. Owners who had those bikes in their garages suddenly wondered if their loyalty meant nothing, if the company could flip the switch on heritage without even blinking. The payoff Harley offered? Nothing. No explanation, no ceremony, no respect. Just a hole where icons once stood. The message was loud. Our memories were expendable. They did not just discontinue motorcycles, they deleted memories. For countless riders, these machines were first loves, freedom tickets, and lifelong companions. To wake up and see them erased without ceremony felt like betrayal carved in chrome. It proved Harley was no longer listening to the people who built them. And as riders processed the shock, the next betrayal did not come from brochures or spec sheets. It came from a place sacred to biker culture itself. Sturgis felt empty without us. For the first time, the Harley tent at Sturgis looked like a ghost town. The rally that had roared for generations, the one where engines echoed across South Dakota skies, stood half silent. Rows of chrome sat untouched. Sales staff leaned on counters, scrolling their phones. The air that once buzzed with pride felt hollow. We built that rally. Riders from every corner of the country made pilgrimages every August, spending hard-earned wages just to be part of the tradition. And Harley had always been at the center, the heartbeat of the gathering. But this year, they left us standing there like strangers. No thunder of excitement, no sense of community, just corporate booths, empty aisles, and the creeping feeling that the brand was no longer one of us. People did not scream. They did not throw things. They simply walked past in quiet rejection, turning their backs the same way Harley had turned theirs. And that silence hit harder than any protest, because it spoke of a bond broken. The emptiness at Sturgis was more than physical space, it was cultural silence. Riders walked past the tent without anger, but with something worse, indifference. That absence of energy proved loyalty was broken. A brand can survive criticism, but it cannot survive being ignored by the very people who once worshipped it. But the emptiness of Sturgis was not the only sign. Back home, workers in factories and families in small towns felt a different kind of betrayal, the kind that shows up in pink slips. If you're feeling the frustration riders are shouting about, hit like and drop your thoughts below. Your voice matters, and together we'll show Harley the community isn't staying silent. The day our jobs were shipped away, they told us Thailand was temporary. We have heard that lie before. In meeting rooms and press conferences, executives promised that American bikes would stay American. But in Wisconsin and in Kansas City, families are paying the price for those temporary shifts. Behind every polite press release is a worker whose livelihood disappeared, a father who built frames for 20 years, a mother who inspected paint lines until her eyes blurred, neighbors who showed up at dawn, proud to punch a clock for a company that sold freedom. They carried Harley through recessions, through buyouts, through corporate missteps, and their reward was a one-way ticket overseas. This was not just numbers on a balance sheet. It was school tuition gone, mortgages at risk, small towns stripped of their heartbeat. The company that once bragged about American steel and union pride now leaned on global efficiencies, as if efficiency could replace identity. Every paycheck lost was more than money. It was dignity stolen. Families who had kept Harley alive through decades of ups and downs were rewarded with pink slips. Generations of workers saw their sacrifice tossed aside in the name of efficiency. The human cost was invisible to shareholders, but devastatingly real, and riders knew the truth. When a brand ships out the jobs, it eventually ships out the soul. Yet the betrayal did not stop with workers. Even the motorcycles themselves became unrecognizable. Quick pit stop, gear that works, not height. 2025 helmets, jackets, gloves, boots, accessories are linked below. Back to it. They replaced a legend and laughed. The Ultra Limited, gone. A glossy stand-in shoved in its place. For decades, the Ultra was the crown jewel of long-haul riders, the bike that carried stories across state lines and generations. You could spot its silhouette in parades, at rallies, on highways stretching beyond the horizon. It was not just a model, it was the flagship of Harley's promise. And then, without so much as a rider's salute, it was replaced. Not improved, not evolved, replaced. What we got instead felt like an imitation, a shell marketed with slick photos but stripped of the grit and gravitas that made the Ultra a legend. Riders walked into showrooms expecting to see heritage, but found something unrecognizable in its place. We did not just lose a model, we lost trust. If they can kill the Ultra, what else can they erase? Every rider suddenly wondered if their bike would be next, if years of loyalty meant nothing against the next boardroom decision. Replacing a model is normal. Replacing heritage with corporate gloss is not. Riders saw through it instantly. They knew this was not evolution, but erasure. When loyalty was swapped for marketing spin, a dangerous truth surfaced. Harley was no longer defending its legacy. It was mocking it. That wound cut deepest. And in that doubt, a dangerous word began to circulate. Not shouted, not advertised, but whispered from rider to rider, dealership to dealership. Boycott. The quiet boycott that terrified them. Dealers sat on rows of bikes nobody wanted. Machines that once rolled out of showrooms within hours of arrival now collected dust under fluorescent lights. Salesmen leaned against handlebars, staring at phones, waiting for customers who never came. The boycott was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was worse. It was quiet, steady, and undeniable. If you tried to trade in your Harley, you felt the sting firsthand. Offers came in thousands below what they used to be. Some dealers would not even accept the bikes, afraid of inventory piling higher. Riders who had once been proud to say, "I own a Harley," suddenly realized that pride came with a penalty. The brand that promised value and identity was now sinking in the market like a stone. The boycott terrified them because it showed that we were not powerless. We did not need riots or picket lines to make an impact. All we had to do was stop buying. Stop trading. Stop feeding the machine. And every day the silence grew louder in the balance sheets. A boycott is not loud in its beginning. It is quiet refusal. One rider decides not to buy. Another holds off trading in. Soon, dealers are staring at unsold rows. The fear did not come from shouting crowds, but from the eerie silence of wallets closing one by one. But while the sales floor turned into a graveyard, union halls across America were catching fire. The anger was no longer just financial. It was personal. Union brothers, pink slips, and broken promises. 600 workers told to trust the process. That was Harley's answer when factories went dark and shifts disappeared. But trust does not pay the mortgage. Trust does not feed children. These were our neighbors, our families. And they were told that loyalty was no longer worth a paycheck. In Milwaukee, Kansas City, and towns scattered across the Midwest, men and women who had given decades to the brand suddenly faced unemployment. They remembered the promises. Jobs would stay in America, bikes would always be American-made, union brothers would never be abandoned. Those words dissolved into pink slips printed on cold paper. The betrayal cut deeper because these were not just jobs. They were livelihoods tied to tradition. Fathers who had assembled frames now watched their sons prepare to leave for work overseas, because the next generation of bikes would be built on foreign soil. Pride and craftsmanship, once the heartbeat of Harley, was replaced with outsourced labor and empty factories. Union loyalty used to mean something. It meant standing shoulder to shoulder when times got hard. But this time, workers stood together not to build, but to fight for survival. Broken promises burned hotter than layoffs. The pain of betrayal spread faster than any rumor. Trust once lost cannot be regained. And when workers spoke out, Washington could no longer pretend it was business as usual. The halls of Congress began to echo with the voices of the betrayed. Congress finally calls them out. Senators waved Harley's ESG reports in the air, like evidence at a trial. They read aloud the numbers, the subsidies, the taxpayer incentives that Harley had accepted, money meant to preserve American jobs. Then they pointed to the layoffs, the closures, and the overseas production lines. The contradiction was no longer whispered on forums or discussed at rallies. It was shouted under the Capitol dome. We already knew the truth. We had lived it. Our towns lost businesses. Our friends lost paychecks. Our resale values collapsed. But now lawmakers were saying it out loud. Harley took our money, then took our jobs. For riders, it was vindication. We had been told for years that we were overreacting, that corporate strategy was beyond our understanding. But as senators slammed their fists on desks, the world saw what we had seen all along: a company trading its soul for shareholder praise. Lawmakers love symbols, and Harley was one of the strongest. But when senators waved those ESG reports, the image shattered. Suddenly, what riders had been shouting for years was confirmed under oath. Harley cashed in on loyalty, subsidies, and trust, then gutted the people who kept the brand alive. Yet, as the hearings gained headlines, another wound opened. This one was not about politics or subsidies. It was about the machines themselves, the very bikes that carried our culture forward. And that is where the insult became mechanical. The Nightster that wasn't ours. The new Nightster looked like a stranger wearing our jacket. The name was familiar, but the spirit was gone. Gone was the bark, the muscle, the growl that made a Harley unmistakable. In its place sat a sleek, sanitized bike that felt more like a corporate prototype than a rider's machine. To the untrained eye, maybe it looked modern, but to us, it felt hollow. No soul in the frame, no swagger in the stance. Just plastic mid-controls that cramped taller riders and marketing buzzwords that could not hide the truth. This was not built for us. It was built for investors, for image, for a demographic that Harley imagined but never understood. We wanted rebellion. We got excuses. We wanted a motorcycle that carried history in every vibration. Instead, we got a machine that could have been stamped with any badge. The Nightster was the proof that Harley no longer spoke our language. A motorcycle without soul is not a motorcycle. It is just machinery. Riders looked at the Nightster and saw corporate design by committee, not passion forged in garages. Every missing growl, every awkward angle reminded them of what was stolen. It was not innovation. It was identity theft disguised as progress. And while Harley stumbled in its own shadow, another brand seized the moment. A rival stepped forward, holding the flag that Harley had dropped. We flooded the market with our anger. Used Harleys stacked up online, priced to move but left untouched. Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, and cycle forums turned into digital graveyards of unwanted machines. Bikes that once sold in hours now sat for weeks, gathering dust both in garages and on dealer floors. The resale market told the truth that Harley's executives would never admit. Riders were walking away. That bike in your garage, worth thousands less than it was just last summer. Owners who had poured money into chrome, upgrades, and custom work suddenly faced trade-in offers that felt like insults. A Harley used to hold value like gold. Now it was slipping faster than a used luxury car. The pride that once came with ownership had been replaced with anxiety about losing your shirt if you ever tried to sell. The boycott had moved beyond empty showrooms. It had turned into a financial storm, tearing into the wallets of loyal riders. And those riders, furious at being treated as disposable, decided to pass the pain upward. When the resale market collapsed, so did the illusion of invincibility. Used Harleys on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace became more than listings. They became protest signs. Riders slashed prices not because the bikes lost value overnight, but because the brand had. It was anger written in dollar signs. A refusal to prop up a company that no longer respected its people. And as the market bled, another front cracked open. Wall Street, once confident in Harley's image, started showing signs of panic. Shareholders can't ride loyalty. Analysts finally admitted the truth. Harley's brand was bleeding. For years, Wall Street had defended the company, painting its troubles as minor bumps on the road to modernization. But now, even the spreadsheets told a story of decline. Earnings projections were lowered, sales charts dipped red, and dealer inventories ballooned. For us, it was never just numbers. It was our culture collapsing, measured in the silence of rallies, in the absence of familiar models, and in the loss of respect from a company we once trusted. But for investors, it was raw math. Loyalty does not balance quarterly reports. Passion does not pay dividends. Riders could not be measured in charts, and that was Harley's fatal mistake. When shareholders realized that consumer trust had been broken, they began to doubt everything. Stock that once symbolized stability now looked like a gamble. Hedge funds whispered about abandoning their stakes. Calls with executives turned hostile, with questions sharper than exhaust pipes. For riders, loyalty was leather, scars, and countless miles on the odometer. For shareholders, loyalty was numbers on a screen. But when the culture cracked, so did the spreadsheets. Wall Street finally realized what bikers always knew. You cannot reduce brotherhood to margins. Without trust, the numbers collapse too. And lawmakers, seeing the financial unraveling, weaponized it. What began as balance sheet anxiety turned into political ammunition aimed directly at Harley's boardroom. When woke Harley made it to Washington, clips of riders calling Harley a sellout played on screens in Congress. Lawmakers queued up the footage, showing men and women in leathers, veterans with folded arms, families with parked bikes they no longer trusted. They mocked us for years, but now they used us as a case study in corporate failure. Conservatives accused Harley of abandoning tradition in pursuit of globalist investors. Progressives accused it of performative equity, hiding layoffs behind polished sustainability reports. For once, both sides agreed on something. Harley had betrayed America. We never needed Washington to tell us what we already knew. But hearing senators repeat our words, hearing our anger translated into policy debates, made the betrayal louder. It was not about a marketing misstep anymore. It was about a national brand losing its soul in front of the world. The spectacle of riders' voices echoing inside Congress felt surreal. What had once been dismissed as fringe outrage became national theater. Clips of bikers on Capitol Hill went viral, not because they were shocking, but because they were true. The betrayal could not be spun anymore. It was undeniable fact. But as cameras rolled and senators scored political points, the real heartbreak was not in D.C. It was back in the small towns that Harley left to rust. You've seen how deep this betrayal runs. Don't miss what's coming next. Subscribe now and ride with us, because the fight for truth, pride, and freedom is only beginning. The towns Harley left behind. A diner in York closed after 97 years. Its last loyal customers were Harley workers who never came back after the factory lights went dark. In Menomonee Falls, the firehouse hosted its last union meeting, with men and women staring at the floor instead of planning the future. In Kansas City, a parts supplier of 30 years padlocked its doors. A handwritten sign taped to the window, "Return to sender." Our main streets lost their heartbeat when the plant shut down. The ripple effects reached barbershops, motels, churches, and corner stores. Pride that had once been tied to a paycheck was erased in a single press release. These were not just job losses. They were cultural amputations. For riders, the closure of those towns felt like a personal wound. Harley did not just take away bikes or jobs. They took away community. They took away belief. They left silence where engines once roared. Factories are not just buildings. They are anchors. When Harley pulled out, it was not just jobs that disappeared, but the heartbeat of whole communities. Local diners, schools, and parades all lost their rhythm. These were not ghost towns by chance. They were made empty by corporate choice, deliberate and cold. And in that silence, something new began to form. Riders realized that if Harley would not carry the culture forward, we would. We don't need their permission. Independent shops are now the new Harley headquarters, where once the company set the tone, now it is the garages, the repair shops, and the backyards where riders meet to keep the culture alive. Mechanics who were pushed aside by dealership policies are teaching new generations how to maintain the old engines, how to keep the iron on the road, even without corporate blessing. The sound of rebellion is no longer coming from Milwaukee, it is coming from the people. We are teaching each other how to ride, how to fix, how to survive without them. When Harley tried to erase the past, riders filled the gap with their own stories in their own hands. Across the country, biker clubs are sponsoring workshops, veterans are hosting ride-outs, and small-town garages are becoming sanctuaries for those who refuse to let the tradition die. Harley's logo may still hang on glossy billboards, but the real culture belongs to us now. The rebellion is not about anger alone, it is about ownership. Independent garages became cathedrals where freedom was rebuilt with grease and grit. In those spaces, riders remembered that culture was never owned by a corporation. It was always ours. And without Harley, we discovered we were stronger than ever. And the anger did not stop with tools and wrenches. What began in garages spread into politics, where global decisions started hitting riders' wallets. Tariffs, taxes, and bikes that don't belong to us anymore. Europe punishes our bikes, Thailand rewards Harley, and we get stuck with the bill. Trade deals, tariffs, and tax credits were supposed to keep American steel competitive, but instead they gave Harley every excuse to move production offshore. Each new policy meant more uncertainty for riders at home, who now pay higher prices for bikes that feel less and less like their own. Every ride we buy now tells us this is not really ours anymore. The promise of made in America has been replaced by assembled for global markets. It is a phrase that sounds hollow when you are staring at a mortgage, watching wages vanish, and paying more for a machine built half a world away. Riders sense it every time they grip the handlebars. Pride has been replaced with doubt, and the cost keeps climbing. The numbers on tariffs and taxes may sound abstract, but riders feel them at the pump, on the payment plan, and in the sacrifice of pride. Every fee whispers the same truth. These bikes do not belong to us anymore. They belong to boardrooms and foreign deals instead. But even as trade politics threatened to crush what little faith remained, two groups stood together who rarely share the same stage. Their message was simple: enough is enough. A new alliance against the betrayal. Union workers and war veterans together demanding accountability. It was not a rally organized by corporate sponsors or political strategists. It was a gathering born from pain. The workers had built the bikes. The veterans had ridden them into parades, funerals, and across battlefields. And both groups felt the sting of betrayal when Harley turned its back. These are the people who built the bikes and fought for the flag. They represent sweat, sacrifice, and loyalty, the three things Harley once claimed to honor. But when factories closed and rhetoric replaced reality, they realized the company was no longer on their side. The alliance became a symbol. Veterans stood beside workers holding signs that read, "American made means American paid." Their voices rang louder than any advertisement. Something powerful happens when unlikely allies unite. Union workers, scarred by layoffs, and veterans, scarred by war, found themselves on the same side of a picket line. Their voices carried moral weight no press release could drown. When those two groups stand together, they redefine what American loyalty really means. And now, the only vote that matters does not happen in Congress or in corporate boardrooms. It happens on the showroom floor, where every rider faces a choice that will define the road ahead. Your ride is your rebellion. Signing for a Harley used to mean pride. Now it feels like a gamble. Every buyer wonders if the value will tank, if the warranty means anything, if the badge still stands for the brotherhood it once promised. The paperwork used to seal a bond. Now it feels like a risk. The choice in front of you is not just about horsepower. It is about heritage, identity, respect. Do you reward a brand that abandoned its riders? Or do you ride with those who still believe in grit and loyalty? A motorcycle is no longer just transportation. It is a declaration. Your next ride says whether you accept the betrayal or fight against it. Every ignition switch is a choice. Every throttle twist is a declaration. Riders no longer see Harleys as machines, but as symbols of betrayal. And so they choose differently. They ride differently. They buy differently. Rebellion has always lived on two wheels. Now it simply wears a different badge. So the question is simple. Who really deserves your next 1,000 miles? You do not need Harley's permission. You do not need their stamp of approval. The rebellion begins with your choice, your road, your roar. They tried to rewrite the story of riders, but the road still belongs to us. What you've seen isn't just about bikes. It's about loyalty, freedom, and pride. We don't bow to boardrooms. We ride for each other. And that's a bond no corporation can break. Stay with this channel, subscribe, and ride alongside us. Because the next chapter of this rebellion is already unfolding, and you won't want to be left behind.